everybody. Happy Thursday. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
How's everybody doing?
Great.
Busy.
It's busy.
Yeah.
Steve, I know you're busier than most. What are you doing today on the ranch?
So today we weaned calves yesterday, so we're cattle work all day, but today we're switching over. The sun's shining again and it's getting dry again, so we're going to start cutting soybeans today.
All right. Good luck. I mean, this is beautiful weather, but it's dry, right? Is it too dry right now for what you're trying to do? Or is it okay?
It's been dry down here in a lot of this part of Illinois. We had a lot of rain this summer, so the crop looks pretty decent, but our pastures and everything have dried up. We definitely need rain, when we can get it.
Okay. Well, good luck today with all of that. Helen, you're in the suburbs with me. We're not doing that type of work, but I know you're busy. You have several different jobs. I appreciate you both coming onto this live stream today. Busy lives, busy families, but I think it's just good for us as a board to get in front of some of our social media followers and our members and just talk a little bit about the litmus of where we are in the state. And with grassroots activism, I know a lot of people are talking about the 2026 midterms. So we'll get into both of these things. But why don't you just real quickly kind of reintroduce yourselves? I think Alvin Louie with Courage is a Habit, he's a partner of ours. He's doing 30 days of videos to, I think, just connect with a lot of newbies, particularly what has happened in the last couple of weeks in the midst of tragically seeing Charlie Kirk assassinated. This is waking up a lot of normies who are used to being quiet and are recognizing that they should be using their voice and that they should be empowered to speak, use their First Amendment right to free speech, speak to their faith, and to do everything they can to protect their families. So Alvin is like reintroducing himself and his organization to new followers. And I think that that's in line with that. That's good for us to do as well. We have a base of people who've been following us since 2021, but we know there are a lot of new people. So I would like for them to hear from you, where you guys live, a little bit about you, and just kind of reintroduce yourself to Illinois. So Helen, why don't we start with you? Vice President of Awake Illinois.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Shannon. So I currently live in Skokie. I grew up on the north side of Chicago in Lincoln Square. My mom actually lives in the house that I still lives in the house that I grew up in. I've been in tech for about 30 years, started off as a software engineer and then worked my way into enterprise sales. So started working, I think, right around COVID, 2020, kind of the same thing for you, Shannon, right? 2020 hit, we saw our kids, the lockdowns, saw what was going on in remote learning, and we started a parent group here in Skokie that covered the Niles Township area. And then from there it grew. We had a lot of parents. We had a lot of awakening happen. And I was lucky enough to join the Awake team here. And it's been a great journey watching a lot of the transformation that's been taking place through the grassroots efforts.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your advocacy and leadership, Helen. And it was great to welcome you to the team. And then Steve is an OG. He's been a director from the beginning since summer of 2021. So why don't you share with everybody stuff about you and then, where you think we are right now in Illinois, because you're downstate, right? So I like how we can bridge what's happening downstate and then also what's happening in the Chicago area. So why don't you reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shannon and Helen, both of you. My name's Steve Lucie, and I live in Basco, Illinois, outside of Basco, Illinois. You can't find it on a map. It's small, it's rural. I live in just basically far western Illinois. So I'm about 4.5 hours from Naperville, about 5 hours from Chicago. And I sort of started the same way as you guys did. I was on the school board for 17.5 years, and I was actually on the school board here at my local little school, Warsaw, Illinois, when COVID hit, when COVID, what they called this novel, remarkable virus that seemed to be sort of a dud, really, if we think about it. But I was just not sure of everything, but I was sure of one thing, that we have constitutional rights and they were being trampled on. So as a school board member, I voted to open our school, fall of 2020, which we did. And then I saw that things weren't good with children, what they were doing to children, with making them wear masks and things of that nature, that was really going to be harmful for education. And as we've seen play out, that was correct. That was harmful, and in many ways. So I met Shannon. I think back in the day we did a rally or something for some candidates up at, I forget the name of the town, but it was a pumpkin patch, Shannon. I just remember that.
I think it's Homer Glen area, somewhere around there. Yeah.
So I just became a director of Awake Illinois, and I had started a local group, sort of like Helen, called We Stand for Our Students, which kind of got the attention of the governor back in the day when we were making some noise. And folks in my neck of the woods, they just weren't having their rights trampled on quite as much. And I think it became a great bridge for me to stay with Awake, because everybody, you've seen it on the media and talk about, well, Naperville, Illinois, Shannon Adcock, and that is true. But there's a lot of followers and people across this whole state that have now come together under one voice with Awake, and I'm very proud to be a part of that.
Yeah, agreed. I feel the same way, Steve.
Thank you for that, Steve. Thanks for both of you reintroducing yourselves. And it's been a privilege to call you not just advocate colleagues, but some of my closest friends. So we talk like every day. So that's why it's funny to see you on here. We talk all the time, but we don't really see each other face to face. So I think, you're right. Awake Illinois is a grassroots platform. We are team sanity, normal people. Steve, you have more political experience having served in an office. In 2020, I was big in reopening schools as just a mom of three, had done all the PTA stuff. My photography business donated hours and hours of free family portraits for fundraisers, super involved in the community and in the school. And then when it came time to see school closures and the politics behind that, I thought, well, this is not representing our family, nor is it representing logic in these policies. A lot of the school board members at the time did not have students even in the district. So after the reopened schools cause, I just thought I'd run for school board, and boy, was I green. Not only do I like the color green, but I was very green and naive. And once that school board race was very contentious, they did not want me on the school board as just a normal mom, questioning some of the pedagogies in these schools of separating kids by race and all the stuff that was going on. I just thought, wow, everything I thought to be true has turned out to be quite questionable. So after that very contentious school board run, 2 days later, I started Awake Illinois and found just normal people wanting to petition their government respectfully, using their voice to speak up for their kids, for what they're seeing in their communities. And Pritzker and the bootlickers and these leftist ideologues don't really like us very much, but that's okay. Their fear sustains us. And so here we are still going strong. I think it's important to touch on something that, again, a lot of people are, they're kind of struggling right now with what they saw happen with Charlie Kirk, right? How many of us have gotten messages from people who, we know who they are in the community, we know their family, and maybe they've supported our efforts, but this really has shaken a lot of people. What are you hearing from people about what they witnessed, what their children have witnessed with Charlie Kirk, who is such a free speech champion, obviously very conservative, a devout Christian, very bold, started his organization in Illinois where he grew up, born and raised here, just grew this titan of a grassroots effort across the country, was integral in getting President Trump elected. And to see him so publicly and violently killed on a college campus in Utah, just share with me, what are you hearing from people in terms of maybe this motivating them to get involved in advocacy or in politics?
Well, I'll jump in first. I was actually in Canada on a fishing trip that week. It's kind of rare for me to get away, but I had a chance to go with some friends, and I did that and had a wonderful time. But then in certain spots I could get signal, and I started getting all these messages from people that I knew. And what struck me was several of them were from younger they were men, younger men, boys that had grown up around me, and they were sending me messages from college where they were at in college, and they're like, "Have you seen this, Steve?" And oh my God, blah blah blah, and all this stuff, and it kind of struck me that, wow, these guys are really tuned in to what's going on, and these are rural kids, so I don't know, you guys can speak more to the younger kids in suburban areas, but I was just surprised that they were in tune to that so much, because a lot of things happen in the news cycle, and those kind of kids don't really talk about it, at least to me and stuff. They knew what I've done as an advocate and things, and some of these kids grew up in high school when I was pushing for the things that we started pushing for with the Wake. So I think it was a giant wake up call for a lot of younger people. And from what I've seen, that may continue, I think. I mean, talking with him, the guy was just a smart guy. Charlie was a wonderful, smart guy. And he had a great way about him of communicating with young people. I always say myself, I have a rough and gruff attitude, and I'm very outspoken, probably to a fault sometimes. I don't debate well, and I admit that. I admit my faults. That's one of them. But Charlie wasn't that way. He was professional and courteous and a good Christian. And it was just, I think, shocking to young people that someone would try to silence that voice, which they tried to do. But obviously his voice is going to carry.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I would agree with that, Steve. And I wouldn't say you're rough and gruff. We've been working with you long enough to know you've been very diplomatic. I think most of us want common sense. Charlie Kirk represented common sense conversations, open up dialogue, to have conversations with, diverse experiences, diverse thoughts, and see if they can kind of come to the middle. I know for my daughter, she came home from school and she said that horrible reel of Charlie when he was shot in the neck was circulating amongst all her friends, and they were devastated. They were horrified. And it killed me because, we're in a generation now where the kids are so desensitized to violence. They look at that reel. And I even said to my daughter, I said, what'd you do after you saw that reel? And she goes, it was horrible. It was very sad. And I said, did you kind of scroll up? Did you go to the next reel? And she said, yeah. So there's a realization that our kids are desensitized because of social media. But it has impacted not only the kids, but it's impacted the parents. I can tell you, I had a lot of friends send me text messages asking about colleges, asking about SEC colleges, and where am I going to send my daughter to college, because they're so concerned about their kids, coming from a conservative household and then going into college and then coming out radicalized. And this is a top of mind concern for many parents. You don't have to be conservative either. You could be a moderate, you could be a moderate household. You could be a household that just talks about common sense. You may be a household of parents that vote. Maybe you vote Democratic, maybe you vote Republican. You just vote for the candidate that you think is the best. And you don't want your child in spending all of this money sending him away to college to come out radicalized. So those are a lot of the conversations that are coming up with parents. And then the kids, the conversation is, all of this violence that they see online, especially like the Ukrainian refugee who was stabbed on the train too. That video was circulating as well. So, I mean, we've got some major problems that we've got to address, and it takes a village to do that.
Well, this all happened within days, where the victim in North Carolina was violently killed by a man who had a terrible criminal record, shouldn't have been on the streets.
Right.
And we saw her die on this footage. It was horrifying. And that was just a couple days before we saw Charlie Kirk assassinated in Utah. And so in such a short, acute amount of time, two terribly violent acts of murder that, yes, this young generation has witnessed. And I feel terrible for these young kids, but at the same time, what they have seen since these acts is just people are using the word revival. People are speaking boldly to their faith, to free speech, to the values that, should just be shared human values, not even political ones. Just
Right.
live in America and have free speech should be valued by anyone on the political spectrum. And then to grieve innocent life being lost should be a shared human value, and a human experience to grieve over innocent people. And certainly Charlie, I mean, these young kids, he connected so well to them. He inspired them, especially young men who, in a highly feminized sector of education, have kind of been, I think, I'm going to use the word oppressed, especially if they are conservative, if they are Christian. They've been told they're a problem. And so this has very much been happening in government and in policy and in our culture. And so Charlie was kind of an alternative to say, hey, if you're in a college campus, you're Christian, you're conservative, let's have some debate. Let's speak freely to who we are. And he did it in a fun way. He did it in a respectful way. But what a lot of families have been upset about is seeing people celebrate this man's death. Like they are dancing on his grave effectively.
Yeah.
Even people who are entrusted with your children, whether it is teachers or nurses or whoever. This is something that is really waking people up. Now, we've known we have ideological differences, but this is evil. Like, this is what people are having to reconcile, that this isn't just politics. This isn't just policy. This isn't just an election. This isn't just a culture war. There is some real evil stuff going on here. So people are, I think, feeling a little unnerved, but also seeking people who share their values, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Steve, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. And I made a couple videos about it, talking about how, if you're actively supporting that a guy was murdered in cold blood in front of all these students and people and the world, then you have a problem. That's not okay. And I even made a comment about it. It should not be political. Helen's right. Everybody thinks that, Awake is just this hateful organization that hates all Democrats and this and that. That's not true. I have many friends that are Democrats. I sell beef to people that are Democrats, and they wouldn't condone this kind of thing. So I think that's where we need to start getting people to focus that, you don't have to be set in a box somewhere that you are one certain thing. I don't agree with all of the policies that we're seeing even today, and that's okay, and I definitely don't agree with the policies coming out of Illinois. I haven't for some time, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to celebrate someone getting murdered. That's a bad thing. That's an evil thing for a human being to be celebrating. And I think the rhetoric that we've seen over the last few weeks about that has been really harmful for our country when we see people celebrating that. And I just hope people can find a higher road and find a middle ground. And I think that's what our message is at Awake as well.
Well, exactly. And I think you've heard this through several individuals that have been out there. There has not been any rioting. There hasn't been any violence after this tragedy of losing Charlie Kirk. It's been prayer. It's been supporting one another. It's been, how can we do better? And how do we lift our youth or the younger generation? So it's a completely different response than what we had, than what we've witnessed in the past. I'm not going to bring up anything specific, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And, we talked about this on the Twitter space last night, where a lot of parents and a lot of people are really rallying around these kids that want to start Turning Point chapters at their schools or in their area. So that's an actionable, that's something you can put into action, whether it's your grief or your frustration. You can help these kids start chapters. You can support them with places to meet. We can talk more about that in a minute. We did put on our Twitter a while back upon request, awareness that there are some teachers in our schools that are celebrating Charlie Kirk's death or likening, conservative youth to Nazis. And they're posting to social media, and parents are frustrated because they're saying, so if my child wears a Turning Point shirt or openly talks about how they are conservative or Christian or what have you, are they going to face retribution or worse from a teacher who is celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, calling these kids Nazis? That's a concern. Mm-hmm. And so in the past, we saw where teachers have been fired or forced to resign for their public comments on social media. And this turns into a really interesting debate on free speech. Yeah. And so, there is this consideration, if you are a public, if you're a public government teacher, public school teacher, are there going to be repercussions for this? Apparently there will be, because teachers have been fired for posting concerns on Black Lives Matter and criticizing that. That was a teacher in Palatine. And so there's conflict with potentially the ethics code of teachers, and also the collective bargaining agreement that's made in a school district on anything that could be said publicly by this teacher. Could it disrupt the culture of the classroom, et cetera? And so this is one teacher, Carolyn Pinta, up in Lake County, Killdeer School District. We did a whole thread on this and just posed some questions, showed the collective bargaining agreement, some things that maybe she had violated, and then also the Illinois educator ethics code, if you will. And then the court precedent that teachers may potentially get fired for their comments on social media. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I do. I've been around education pretty much my whole adult life. Like I said, I was on a board for many years. And do we want to hold our professional teachers at a higher standard? Yes, I believe we do. Do we want them to have their constitutional rights upheld? Also, yes, and very, very important. We stand for that at Awake Illinois throughout whatever that may be. I don't like people kneeling for the national anthem, but that is their right. And, I understand that. So I think that this falls on local schools and local school boards, and they can set policy to the standards that they want to hold their teachers to. Another thing that I'll point out, and I know many, many very good teachers. I think sometimes we get a bad rap here at Awake saying that, we're not supportive of teachers. That's not true. You guys know me, I definitely am. And all of the good teachers I know, they do not bring personal things and politics into their classrooms. They are there to do a professional job and teach kids. Reading, for example. And those are our best teachers among us. And if we would just have sort of that code of ethics followed, we wouldn't be dealing with any of this. And I think that, again, it's on local school boards to set policy and hold these people accountable for them as employers and employees. And then that sort of bridges the gap from your constitutional rights back to your workplace ethics and everything like that. And honestly, it's not that hard to be a decent person. Honestly, it's not.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. The teachers are a public figure in a sense that kids look up to them as a role model, and they need to be good role models. I know with Fairview School District here, when COVID hit, it was really hard for the teachers. And so one of the school board meetings, I remember there were a lot of individuals getting up there complaining about all of, the remote learning, because it was tough to adjust. I actually got up and thanked the teachers for their hard work, because it was not easy for them to adjust and go from classroom to remote. So we recognize that. We're not here to demonize teachers. We're just saying you're good role models. So be the good role model, because you're a public role model for those kids, and they don't need to know.
Expectation for us as parents is that our kids are not going to hear what the teacher's sexuality is or their political views. Like that's really that's like the basic model. It shouldn't have to be celebrated when that basic expectation is met, right? Correct. Like there shouldn't be a Medal of Freedom award given to a teacher who doesn't talk about their sexuality or their politics. Like that's the base expectation. So when we see that base expectation totally violated by people we're entrusting young, impressionable minds to, now we have a problem. But I'm a free speech advocate, but the Seventh Circuit Court in Illinois agreed that a local school district could fire a teacher for their political social media posts. I didn't make this rule. None of us made this rule. This is a precedent that was set in the court. And I think you could argue it's a dangerous one. But the reality is you do not have, you have more liability when you are a teacher, and parents are trying to see who is entrusted with my child, who is going to potentially look at my child with wrongful prejudice, or will my child face retribution if they're a Charlie Kirk fan, if they're sad about his death, right? And so the teachers kind of gotten a lot of heat, but the court made that rule. We did not make it. It is a court precedent. And if you're going to say that a teacher who criticized Black Lives Matter could get fired, got news for you. If you're celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, Charlie Kirk was an objectively good person. People are grieving over him. Take the outcome as you will.
Well,
Absolutely.
So the thing of it is, you guys, we are the boss, whether you like it or not. We are the taxpayers. We are the boss, and we're elected to a school board who's the ultimate boss. But the taxpayers elect the school board. So, you wouldn't hire a mechanic or a plumber that you just could not stand some of the things coming out of their mouth, or you could not align with their values at all for some of the evil things that they might say. And you have a choice in America whether to hire someone else or not. So ultimately, it does go down to that. Nobody's saying that these people can't stop that profession and go out in public like I do and spew my views, and I'm free to do that. That doesn't mean I will get hired by certain people or organizations. Right. I likely would not get hired by several, if I was to look for a job. Helen, this. I might not get hired for things.
Try being in the tech industry and being an advocate, right?
You can boil it down real simple like that. I mean, it is a fine line, Shannon. I know we agree on this. Free speech is the utmost important thing in our country, one of them, obviously. But if the boss says, I don't want you to act that way, I don't think it's ethically right, then you kind of know that going in. And I think we've kind of gotten off track of that in the last 5-6 years.
Those environments typically too are adults working with other adults.
Correct.
Right? And the impression that you leave on a brand or on a company, you're representing the brand, you're representing your coworkers, but the complexity is that these are people entrusted with children. So, it's just a little more emotional, a little more tender, I think, for some people. And it's no surprise to us that there are far left ideologues in these schools. I think that what this is just a whole other level of evil and just lacking human compassion. If you see somebody who lacks human compassion, you're going to wonder if your child is safe with them. It's not a far stretch to question that. And so parents have been pulling their children from this teacher, Carolyn Pinta's classroom, because they're worried. Is that the right reaction? Not up for me to judge, but if parents are worried and they're pulling their kids from a classroom where they feel their child is not safe, this is where we are. I would rather Carolyn Pinta had kept that to herself and showed compassion. I mean, I don't think that's asking a lot. We should not be celebrating an innocent man's assassination. Like it's scary that we have to even say that, that we have to actually ask for human compassion, but here we are.
Well, and that's where the common sense comes in.
Yes, for sure.
It goes to judgment. I've said this back, 4 or 5 years ago. Do I want someone leading my school and my board and my children that has such poor judgment that they're okay with things like this? That's what concerns me. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know some of these things. A boy is a boy, a girl is a girl. When we have these leaders in our communities saying that, I saw something from the Illinois Department of Public Health, which is our public health department, yesterday, saying that they're calling women pregnant people. They're moms. They're pregnant women. They're not pregnant people. We know this. So, when you look at all that stuff collectively, you see that the judgment is so poor from these people. You don't necessarily want them in charge of your children. And That
No.
was the main reason we started Awake Illinois, and the main reason I spoke up years ago at our school, which
Right.
was unpopular at the beginning, but to protect the children. Leave the children alone is what I've always said, and you guys have heard me say that, and it's really, that's what we need to do. We need to protect them and leave them alone instead of using them as pawns. And I think some of these teachers that are saying these things on social media are using the children in a way.
That's a good point. So I wanted to share, Charlie Kirk came to St. Charles, Illinois in February of 2022. It was one of the couple of times I had the pleasure of meeting him, and a lot of the Turning Point USA teens that had chapters in the Chicago area. Big fight against the forced masking. This was actually, I think, not even 2 weeks after we got the injunction granted by Judge Grishow, February 4th of 2022. And so Charlie ends up talking a little bit about how the masks, the forced masks are actually reflective of dehumanization and the restriction of liberty, and just, where this goes, right? It's not just a mask. It is control. And so I'll let his words speak for themselves. I'm just going to play a couple different clips that I've time-stamped. So I'll break it up in a few different clips, and we can just talk about how this still applies to all of these fights today. The audio is a little wonky. They were having some mic issues, so the volume may fluctuate. So turn up your volume so you can hear it. And the closed captions are on.
There's a lot to this whole mask thing that I think is worth unpacking, which is, we know it's not about public health. We know it's about control. But what's so interesting is that when it came to the children, it was a unique kind of moment where a lot of different populations, especially in the suburbs, they felt as if they were doing the right thing. And so this is a really good lesson for kind of when you encounter tyranny next. I was talking to my good friend Gary Rabine earlier about this, which is that Gary's been a friend for years. I know he's running for office. We don't endorse at Turning Point USA. He's a great friend, and he's here tonight. We don't endorse. I was talking about this earlier, which is that when tyranny comes again, which we know it's going to come in some sort of variation, it's already here, right? We have to make sure people hopefully learn a lesson from this entire thing. But more damage has been done to humanity in the last 100 years from people who thought they were doing the right thing. This is a very important point, that very few people consciously think they're committing evil. Very few people. Stalin thought he was doing the right thing. So did Mao. They didn't go to sleep like, yeah, I'm doing the wrong thing. It's that, no, a lot of suburban parents, some of them, are like, no, this is the right thing for my kid. Like masking them, not having them be able to see their friends. I'm saving their life. And no, of course, but it warrants a question of how do they come to that conclusion?
That's one part. Do you want me to continue to the next, or do you have any comment on that little bit?
I'll wait for Helen.
When he said that, the one thing that came to mind was the lockdowns and locking down the kids. We've got, at the time, I think Layla was in 5th grade. I mean, there were a lot of parents that I knew that had only children, and they locked those kids down. They didn't let them see their friends. They made them wear the mask. And we did the opposite. I mean, our family was yelling at us because we let the kids come over. We had, 12, 15 kids sometimes on a weekend just to hang out, just so they can blow off steam. But it is, he's right. I mean, what do you do the next time this happens? Because a lot of the kids really were impacted from these lockdowns and from being forced to wear masks and the remote learning. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. I'm going to have us play the next part. It's a few minutes long, but I think it's just, it just still hits home even today, even 3 years later.
The third thing is that, and I kind of get this growing up in this area, and there is a desire to be agreeable. And that's nothing like unique for Chicago per se, but it definitely doesn't help in the suburbs, where no one wants to be the disagreeable parent, right? A lot, and some of you do, I know, I know, trust me. But by the way, that's changed because they left you no choice, right? Where your kid's entire future gets stripped away. And, GBN had a student that committed suicide who was like one of the top football players at their high school last year, largely because of lockdowns. One of the saddest stories that you'll see. I lost friends to suicide, high school and post high school. And so that, by the way, that's a legitimate mental health and public health crisis that our leaders wouldn't even dare talk about. But when we dive even deeper into this, I believe there's something behind the mask that is a societal change. It's a social re-engineering. When you are able to actually control the breathing of a population, you basically control everything, right? What else don't you control from that point forward? And so it really hit me when I was checking into a hotel recently, couldn't understand a thing the person was saying to me because she was wearing a mask. And I realized at that moment, I said, that dehumanizes both. I wasn't wearing a mask, but she was. But so it says in the Bible that we're made in the image of God, right? And it says God spoke into existence. In John 1, it says in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. That word is logos. So Aristotle said that we are the speaking beings. We are the only beings on the animal hierarchy that can speak and make sense of right versus wrong. Now, dogs can say pleasure and pain, but we can make claims on justice. We're the only beings that can do that. And how do we do that? Through speech, through organizing the natural world by saying this is right, this is wrong, this is big, this is small, and we take that for granted, right? But when you are unable to speak, then are you actually still human? At that moment, all of a sudden, they have crushed the soul and the spirit of what it actually means to be a full human. And you see that in the data. IQ levels are going down because of mandatory masking of children. Children are the most medicated, most depressed, most anxious, least likely to communicate to one another generation in history. Isn't that a perfect type of population for a legitimate, like Justin Trudeau style tyrant to come in and tell them what to do? The answer is yes. If you wanted to prime a generation for a legitimate tyrant, this is what you would do. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to, I'm not saying that's what they want to do, but if you wanted to, you would muzzle a generation to believe speaking is hard and wrong. You would have a generation believe that you must always walk around to be submissive to whatever authority tells you no matter what. And it's done in a way that is so, you must say it, you must be unquestioned, no matter what, as it comes forward. And so when you have the government that controls the breath and the speech, then they'll be able to micromanage every other decision that comes after that. And so it really is a physical representation of an attempt to silence you. We talk.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
right. He's right.
I mean, he's right, and he was right. And you've heard me say it, Shannon, our friend Jessica, she talks about it all the time. The mask was always the hill. That was the hill. If they didn't have the mask forced on people, none of this would have happened. That was the link to all of it. I'll give you an example of something that you want to talk about control. Like I said, I was on a school board, and not one time did I ever go into a school board meeting throughout all of that, whether I was speaking at a school or whether I was, most of the time when I was on the school board back in 2020 until April of 21, I did not go into those school board meetings with a mask. And we had, tables set apart. We had a few board members that would come in wearing their masks. We had masks at the front door you were supposed to grab and put on. And
you didn't have police take you out like they did in the suburbs.
Nope. And all of
they
the
had that here.
Different vibe downstate, Steve.
That's right.
But the point is, all of the administrators and everything, they were wearing the masks and all this.
Yeah.
And finally, at one point, late in 2020 or early 21, I finally looked at the superintendent and I said, why are you forcing children to wear a mask and teachers? Mm-hmm. Yet I can walk into this building to a school board meeting and I'm not wearing a mask and you aren't doing anything about it. Why aren't you doing something about that with me? Right. And, it was very telling because mm-hmm. I was still in a public school, right? I mean, according to the state rules and whatever. So, mm-hmm. So why didn't they? And I know other men and a few women that walked into schools and were like me, and nothing happened to them. Now, you go to some schools, they would probably call the police on you and things of that nature. But in this particular situation, it really told me you are controlling the little children and the weaker people among us. And that is not okay. That was like a turning point for me. That is not okay. You should control me if you want to, but stop putting kids on the front line. And that's what they did. They put children on the front line and they controlled them. And we're still seeing the effects of it today.
You're right, Steve. And you guys really led the way. I mean, We Stand for Our Students was listed or was found in an email communication with the governor's people early on, 2021, via Freedom of Information Act. That's how it got discovered. So you guys were OG. You were the disagreeable parents. I loved when Charlie mentioned that. People don't want to be disagreeable.
Yeah, it's not societal norm, right? You're supposed to be nice and blah, blah, blah. And
well, they don't want to stick out. They don't want to stick out.
Yeah, very good. Well, there's repercussions if you do. I mean, things weren't easy for us. I just think it's a great, I know people are going to get tired of us talking about back in the day, but this is what Charlie was about. He was talking about this stuff back then. And that is why he was silenced, you know. They knew he was talking the truth, and they don't want to hear that, you know.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, so the mask thing is done. We fought that. We won that.
Right.
But, you know, he talks about disagreeable parents, and those of us in that theater in February 2022, you know, Tom DeVore was there. A lot of us parent plaintiffs from the case were there. We were fine being disagreeable because it was the right thing to do. Right. And so that was not easy. You faced a lot of, you know, hellfire over it, but it was the right thing to do for kids. And a lot of people knew that was the right thing to do, but they just didn't have the courage to do it. Charlie was basically saying, like, I know in the suburbs or in certain other areas, you don't want to be disagreeable, but you have to have courage. Like, that's really what it took. And it worked. It did. We fought that in Illinois, had to in the court, and we won it, and the House of Cards fell. But the same things apply. You know, if there is a boy going into the girls' bathroom, parents don't want to be disagreeable on that issue, right? Well, some are. And there's going to be some, you know, efforts taking place in the courts here. There's going to be more to come out about that. We're following it and helping people and supporting people with that effort. But here we are again, yet another issue where it's going to take the outliers with courage, the disagreeable parents, to put themselves out there, their family name out there, and to keep, you know, the fight going. Because Illinois is unfortunately still a case study in how wokeism, far left progressivism, anti-liberty, anti-child, anti-family, anti-common sense really has no limiting principles. So it's going to have to be fought in the courts. And yes, Steve, you've always been big about local control. For example, I mentioned the bathroom policies. There are school districts that are going to be passing resolutions to fall in line with federal Title IX protections of students, right? Where sex is biological, and those are going to be the policies. These are outliers, but they are leading the way. And so it will take litigation in the courts. We know that. We'll support that. But unfortunately, Illinois is still just a case study in what the country should not want to become.
That's right.
That was all I had for Charlie's remarks. I just thought it was good to hear his voice that he brought in February of 2022. And then the good news now is that these kids are so energized to start new chapters throughout the state of Illinois. We talked about that on the space last night. And we're going to be supporting these kids. I know a lot of these teenagers personally. These were young kids in maybe upper elementary school when their schools closed. And now over 5 years, they are done. They are done being muzzled, whether it was from the mask. They're done being muzzled, whether it is perceived to be, I don't know, an outlier position, to be for free speech, to be a Christian, to be for liberty. So they're going to be starting these chapters, and it's pretty amazing to see. I'm going to show this tweet here. Bear with me. Turning Point's been sharing these updates. So in the past few weeks, Turning Point USA has received 121,000 plus requests from high school and college students nationwide to start a chapter or get involved with an existing one. This was just yesterday. How amazing is that? I mean, this is a testimony
Right.
to how this generation is no longer going to be muzzled. They're going to find people who share their values, and they're going to find established clubs where they can meet and talk about the Constitution, talk about free speech, talk about their faith. And this is long overdue.
I love seeing that. I think that's great. It's great to see the kids mobilized, the younger generation really stepping up. This is what Charlie Kirk has talked about. It's horrible. I still can't believe he's gone. But I keep going back. I keep looking at his reels and some of the things that he was saying to the younger generation about, stepping up. And we see this now.
We are.
And I really hope this continues, this momentum continues. I think we've got a lot of the majority of the children, the youth, the college students, they all want a good life. They all want to strive for success, right? So feeling like they have to kind of crawl into a corner because of their conservative beliefs or being a Christian, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they're going to step up and speak out, and there is a true revival happening right now, and I'm really happy to see it.
Yeah, and I've talked to teachers. They run the gamut, teaching different subjects. Some of them are football coaches, sports coaches, and they're willing to sponsor these kids for their club because you want to talk about inclusion, right, and diversity. If these kids have never had a club where they could genuinely be non-woke, right, and speak to their values and have that as an option, there are some teachers that are like, sure, why shouldn't you have a club that focuses on debate and on free speech? So I think that even educators are finding their courage. It's not just these kids. And I applaud any staffer that's willing to sponsor one. Some of these schools may have had a cutoff already of new clubs that could be established. So these kids are just going to meet off-site in other places. So I've encouraged anyone in a community that has a space, whether it is a restaurant, a cafe, any type of meeting space that they can donate to these kids so they can meet. I think that would be really helpful. And so these kids, I can see the community coming alongside them. And that's pretty awesome. It's something to celebrate. But I think Gen Z, these kids are like in high school now. And also Gen Alpha, they're on the cusp, some of them. I think they're going to do quite well. I think they're finding their voice. They're going to get loud. And I think they're going to be unstoppable.
Yeah. And really, if you think about it, how could anybody be against that? If you really stop and think about it, even the people that may disagree with us, you're allowing them full inclusion. You're including them into a society and into a group where they are free to ask questions. Maybe they just seriously want to ask questions about Charlie or some of his views. And that is good. That's what he would want.
But if you have a debate group or club at your school that's far left progressive and they're all, all the woke stuff, what they're going to say is, well, we already have, sorry, we can't have Turning Point because we already have a civic organization. It's this one. And it's all the left-wing sponsored teachers and all the, far leftist students. So they're going to say, oh, you conservative kids have to join that one. So I know there are attorneys ready to go that are going to challenge any metrics that may say they can't start a Turning Point chapter because of XYZ. So I think that, it shouldn't come to that. But I know Turning Point's prepared for it if that's the case. Some people, they're getting them approved like that. They're finding some teachers that are going to do this. These kids are not looking to become spectacles. They're not looking to be, super public with their chapter. They just want to find friends and they want to rally around this time. They're feeling very patriotic. They're trying to, find grounding in an otherwise unsettling time politically, culturally. So I think these kids deserve it. The schools should find, not have any trouble approving these. Let's just move forward and give these kids a shot.
You know what, guys? I think I'm going to have to peel out of here soon.
Okay, Steve, good luck with the beans.
I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the comments. I know we didn't have time to talk about everything. I will say that,
we'll do more.
People down in my neck of the woods, we all complain about a lot of things in Illinois. You all need to get out and voice your opinions and vote. We have to have all of our voices collectively in Illinois that want to make change go to the booth and vote. And that's a very important thing and a message I'm going to keep talking about throughout this fall and next year. So don't forget to do that. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you both. And God bless. See you later.
Thanks, Steve. Good luck.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.
So Helen, this is the graphic. This is kind of where we're going to end, is just like a primer for the 2026 midterms. I know we've been getting, all of us, a lot of messages and calls from local GOP leaders and volunteers, candidates themselves, people that are interested to know what we're going to do. At this point, I think this is going to be the focus, to just remind people the dates to get out the vote, starting with the primary. And I see this has the wrong date. Let me close that out. I'll get the right. But what are you hearing in your community in terms of like people circulating petitions or people getting involved in door knocking? What's happening?
So we do have a lot more Republican candidates running. The 9th, I think it's the 9th congressional district. I think we've got like 12 candidates running for that, for Jan Schakowsky's seat. That is going to be a very, very hot part of the election. We don't. I think we have one Republican running, and the rest are all Democrats, and they're either very far left. But we've got people talking about running. They're getting out. They're looking to get signatures. There is the GOP, the Niles Township GOP here, that's getting activated. I'm seeing a lot of Republican organizations in the North Shore area by us getting activated as well. So they're asking for help to get signatures. So if you have a candidate, if a candidate reaches out to you to help get signatures, please help that candidate, because it's going to take a lot, especially if someone's running as an independent versus a Republican. They need twice as many signatures in some places.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people want to be independent. Both parties I'm very critical of in this state, but for the most part, I think, it's hard to say when you're going up against some really woke progressives. I see why some people try and just do the
independent.
Yeah. So both have their risks, I suppose. I'm going to share this graphic that has been corrected here. So Bailey, you are circulating petitions. That's awesome. Good luck. Good luck to you. So yeah, we're not going to get involved in any particular top ballot stuff or any of that. We'll let the people decide that. But we're just right now wanting to circulate for people to mark these dates. It's the biggest hurdle, just simply getting off your butts and voting. I know people have issues with mail-in ballots. I know a lot of people who leave town in spring break. March 17th, that could fall around a spring break. At least do mail-in ballot or vote early. Whatever you can do to get to the ballot and mail it or do it in person, I don't care. But put these dates in your smartphone, put them on your calendar, text this graphic. It's at awakeil.com/vote. Text this to your people. No excuses. And obviously for individual liberty, for your freedom, we endorse the Republican ballots. So pull the Republican ballot in the primary. You in Chicago, you guys are all a little different. You just try to find the lesser of the evils on the Democrat ballot. Good luck. God bless to you. But I know that Illinois, there's momentum here. I don't think it's going to be a red wave per se. I'm a little more pessimistic or realistic depending on how you look at it. But Illinois is in national news constantly for the sanctuary status, for the crime, blah, blah, blah. Pritzker is terrible. So I think there is momentum in certain pockets, and it's going to depend on who's going to have the best ground support. So we'll be paying attention to what areas are looking for us to help amplify that effort. But for now, I think people have to put these dates in their calendars, make a plan to vote, and to vote Republican.
Right. And if you're a candidate, you've got to get out and door knock. You have to meet people.
Yes.
You've got to have conversations. You will not win your election if you don't do that.
Right. That's so true. Yeah, it's very basic, but this is what the left does. The Democrat voters, they get to the doors, they get to knocking, and it works. It's not really rocket science. It's not even dollars necessarily. It's just time and investment. So good luck to all of you that are circulating petitions. You know where to find us if we can help amplify you. And then as we get closer to various election dates, we'll probably have on some candidates along the way for some conversations on the issues, particularly pertaining to parental rights, to education freedom, and all of these things, children's innocence, etc. So thank you, Helen, for coming on. Any closing thoughts before we depart here? 1 hour?
We just don't sit back and complain. Do something. You just got to do something. You got to get up and you got to execute. You can't be the complainer.
That's right. Yeah. And we're going to do more of these live streams. I think this is what we're going to be doing going forward. I think that we've done a lot from filing federal civil rights complaints. We've done a lot at the local level, supporting all of you in your school districts and petitioning your policymakers. What I envision, and we've talked about this, Helen, Steve, and I, we really want to amplify your stories, your wins, and your challenges in the state at the local level. So we want to leverage our platform and reach to really empower people. And I think the more voices they hear from the populace of Illinois, from Team Sanity and from the normies, that's what we want to elevate and use our platform to do going forward. Yeah. So contrary to what I think we would have expected earlier in the year, I think Awake Illinois is still going to stick around and still do what we can do to help people in whatever way we can. So certainly for me personally, in the wake of Charlie's assassination, his microphone might have dropped, but if we have established our own, there's really no reason to not continue amplifying our voices. So I think that's just an opportunity Awake Illinois has, and any grassroots leader anywhere in the country. But I think there's more work for us to do yet, Helen. So I think you're going to
agree.
Steve, Helen, and I some more as we try and help all of you in Illinois protect your children, your families, and advocate for the future of the state. So thanks for tuning in. Share this live stream. We didn't get real deep in any issues, but just kind of priming the way for more conversations going forward.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Shannon.
Yeah, onward for truth and for liberty. And we'll talk to you all soon. Have a good one.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.